I still remember the sound of the door closing that morning. It wasn't loud, but it was final. Mom left without saying goodbye. One minute she was tucking me into bed, humming our favorite lullaby, and the next, gone. No note, no call, just silence. I was only 12, and I didn't understand what had really happened. All I knew was that something in our home shifted the moment she disappeared. Something heavy, something cold. Dad wasn't always like this. He used to laugh. He used to cook pancakes on Sundays and dance in the kitchen like no one was watching. But after Mom left, it was like a switch flipped inside him. He barely looked at me. His hugs disappeared. His voice changed too. No longer warm, just distant, like I was someone he didn't quite recognize anymore. Or maybe, like he didn't want to. I tried asking questions. Where did Mom go? When is she coming back? But the more I asked, the angrier he got, and slowly I stopped asking. I started tiptoeing around the house, careful not to make noise, careful not to exist too loudly. The silence became my answer. Then one night, I heard something that didn't sound like my father at all. A voice, but not his. A whisper, coming from behind the locked door of Mom's old room. The one he said no one should ever open. My heart pounded. I stood frozen outside that door, the air heavy with questions I was too scared to ask. What if she didn't leave on her own? What if she never left at all? That was the night everything started to change, and it was only the beginning. I couldn't sleep that night. Even after I walked away from Mom's door, my mind kept replaying the whisper. It was soft, almost like a breath, but I know I heard it. I wasn't dreaming. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, or maybe the house settling. But deep down, I knew something was off. And it wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling, the kind that crawls up your spine when something isn't right, even if you can't explain why. The next morning, Dad acted like nothing had happened. He sat at the table, sipping his black coffee, reading the paper like he always did. Same blank face, same silence. But when I looked closely, I noticed his hands were shaking, slightly, just enough to make me wonder if he heard it too. I didn't ask. I just ate my cereal quietly, pretending not to notice the tension hanging in the air like fog. Every part of me wanted to ask him about Mom's room, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I remembered the last time I asked about her. His face had gone pale, his jaw clenched, and he told me, "Don't bring her up again. She's gone." That was it. No explanation, just gone. As days passed, the house felt less like a home and more like a puzzle I wasn't supposed to solve. Things started happening, small things. A photo of Mom I kept hidden in my drawer suddenly disappeared. Her favorite scarf, one she always wore when it rained, showed up on the coat rack, still smelling faintly like her perfume. I asked Dad, but he shrugged it off. "Must have been there all along," he said, without even looking at it. But I knew it hadn't. And then there was the music. Late at night, just after the lights were off, I'd hear it. That same lullaby Mom used to hum. It came from the hallway, soft and slow, like someone was trying not to wake me, but also trying to remind me she was still there. Or maybe trying to tell me something I didn't yet understand. I tried telling myself I was imagining things, that maybe I missed her so much I was making it all up. But when I followed the sound one night, it led me right back to that same locked door, and this time, it was slightly open. I stood there frozen, staring at the half-open door. My heart was racing, loud enough that I was sure someone, or something, could hear it. Mom's room had been locked since the day she vanished. Dad had kept the key. I had tried turning the knob dozens of times before, but it never moved. And now, for the first time, it was open. Just enough to tempt me. I pushed it gently. It creaked, and I held my breath. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, and everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. But nothing was out of place. Her books, her shawl on the chair, even the small mirror with a crack in the corner, it all looked like she had just stepped out and might walk back in any moment. I stepped inside, barely breathing. The air smelled like lavender and old paper. I reached for the music box on her dresser, the one she never let me touch when I was younger. I opened it slowly. But it was empty. No music. Just silence. Behind me, the door creaked again. I turned quickly, but there was no one. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I backed out of the room slowly and closed the door, making sure not to let it click shut too loudly. That's when I noticed something on the floor in the hallway, an envelope. My name was written on it in Mom's handwriting. I picked it up with trembling hands. It wasn't sealed. Before I could open it, I heard Dad's voice from downstairs, sharp, angry. "What are you doing up there?" I panicked and shoved the letter into my pocket. "Nothing!" I shouted back. His footsteps started up the stairs, slow but heavy. I ran to my room, shut the door, and slipped the letter under my mattress. When he reached the top, he didn't knock. He just stood there. I could feel him outside my door. Listening, I didn't dare move. The next morning, the letter was gone. I didn't understand how. I had barely slept. I kept replaying it in my mind. Had Dad taken it? Had he been in my room? Or had someone else? And for the first time, I started to wonder, what if the person I was living with wasn't really my dad anymore? I didn't talk much the next few days. At school, I drifted through classes without hearing a word the teachers said. At home, I kept to my room, pretending to do homework while my mind spun in circles. The letter had vanished without a trace. I searched under my mattress again and again, checked my drawers, even lifted the corner of the carpet. Nothing. And Dad, he was watching me more now, not in the way a father looks after his kid, but like someone waiting to catch you doing something wrong. Every time I walked past him, his eyes followed me. Quiet. Cold. One night, I pretended to sleep early. I left my bedroom light off, tucked myself under the blanket, and waited. Around midnight, I heard the sound again, the soft lullaby. It echoed faintly through the hallway. I slowly sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. I stepped out of bed and moved toward the door, careful not to let the floor creak. The music was coming from the end of the hall, from Mom's room. But this time, I wasn't alone. As I reached the door, I saw a shadow move just beyond it. I ducked behind the wall, barely breathing. The door opened slowly. I could hear someone, or something, whispering again, but I couldn't make out the words. It wasn't Dad's voice. It was softer, strained, almost like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. The lullaby faded, replaced by silence. Then I heard a word, just one, clear and soft. "Run." My legs froze. I didn't know if it was a warning or a trap. The next morning, I found something slipped under my pillow. Another envelope. This time it wasn't handwritten. It looked old, dusty, like it had been there for years. Inside was a torn photograph. Mom, standing in the backyard, holding me as a baby. But someone had scratched out Dad's face with black ink. On the back, a date was scribbled. A date 2 weeks after Mom had supposedly left. Nothing made sense anymore. I started digging. In the attic, I found a box labeled with Mom's name. Inside were journals, family photos, and a tiny recorder with a dead battery. I took it all to my room. That night, I waited for Dad to fall asleep, then sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the journals. One entry stopped me cold. It was dated a week before she disappeared. She wrote, "He's not the man I married anymore. I don't feel safe. If anything happens to me, someone needs to know the truth." My hands shook as I turned the page, but the next ones were all torn out. I plugged the recorder into an old charger and waited. A red light blinked. Then, after a long pause, it played. Static at first, then her voice, fragile, afraid. "If you're hearing this," she said, "then he found it. And you're in danger too. He's watching, always watching." And that's when the power in the house suddenly went out. I sat in the pitch-black room, the glow from the recorder the only thing lighting my face. My fingers clenched it tight as the static returned, Mom's voice cutting off mid-sentence. I waited, holding my breath, but nothing else played. Just that final warning echoing in my head. He's watching. Then, footsteps. Slow. Coming up the stairs. I scrambled to hide the recorder under my bed and dove beneath the covers, forcing my breathing to slow. My door creaked open. I didn't dare look. I could feel him there, standing in the dark, silent, listening. After what felt like forever, the door clicked shut again. But I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I stayed home from school, pretending to be sick. Dad barely said a word. He just nodded and went about his day like nothing was wrong. But I knew he was hiding something. I just didn't know how deep it went until the phone rang that afternoon. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I answered it, whispering a nervous hello. The voice on the other end was raspy, older. "Is this her son?" the woman asked. "Who is this?" I said, confused. She paused. "I was your mother's friend. We used to work together before everything happened." I stepped into the hallway to make sure Dad wasn't around. "What do you mean, before what?" There was a long silence, then she said, "She was scared. She tried to tell people, but no one believed her. I got a letter after she disappeared. She said if anything happened to her, you'd be the one to find the truth." My heart pounded. "Do you know where she is?" But before she could answer, the line went dead. That night I snuck back into the attic. I needed more, something solid, something that explained what was happening. Behind a stack of boxes, I found a wooden panel that looked newer than the rest of the wall. I pushed it gently and it popped loose. Inside was a small compartment with a folder marked "Private, for emergency only." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were printed reports, old letters, and a restraining order against my dad. Dated just days before Mom vanished. But the part that stopped my breath cold was a birth certificate tucked in the back. It had my name, but the father's name listed was someone else. I stared at it, my mind racing. If that wasn't my real dad, then who was this man living with me? Pretending? Watching? I barely had time to think. Downstairs, I heard the front door slam shut. Heavy footsteps again, but this time fast, coming up. I stuffed the folder into my shirt, slid the panel shut, and rushed back to my room. Just as I locked the door, I heard him outside it. His voice was low. "You found something, didn't you?" And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about Mom disappearing. This was about who I really was, and what he was willing to do to keep that secret buried. The lock on my door rattled violently. I stepped back, clutching the folder to my chest. His voice was louder now, more urgent. "Open the door. We need to talk." But there was something in his tone, something desperate. I didn't answer. My mind was racing, piecing together everything. The fake name on the certificate, the restraining order, Mom's last journal entries. The man outside my door wasn't just hiding secrets. He wasn't even my father. Suddenly the banging stopped. Silence. I moved closer, pressing my ear against the wood. Then a whisper, low, trembling. "I didn't hurt her. I tried to save her." "What?" Before I could respond, the smoke alarm blared. I smelled it seconds later, burning. I threw open the door and ran downstairs. Thick smoke filled the hallway. A small fire crackled near the living room, papers and photos from the attic scattered in the flames. He stood near it, staring at me. "It was all lies," he said. "She lied to protect you. From him." "From who?" That's when I saw it, another letter half burned on the floor. I snatched it up before the fire could reach it. The edges were scorched, but the words were clear enough. "If something happens to me, don't trust either of them. Not him, not your real father." The world seemed to tilt. "She left," he said, coughing from the smoke. "She left because she found out the truth. You were taken from someone else. She tried to run and I helped her disappear." "You're not my dad," I said, stepping back. "No," he said softly, "but I kept you safe." The fire crackled behind him. Sirens wailed in the distance. I stood frozen, letter in hand, as the truth sank in. Everything I thought I knew about him, about Mom, even about myself, was a lie. But the final twist came days later. A woman arrived at the hospital where I was staying. She looked just like Mom, only older, tired. She sat beside me and whispered, "I never stopped looking for you." I stared at her, unsure whether to cry or run, because in her eyes, I saw the same darkness he had. I stared at the woman, my heart pounding in my chest. Her face was familiar, but I couldn't remember why. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she spoke again. "I'm sorry for what you've been through. I never meant for you to suffer, but I had no choice." The room felt colder, like the weight of the truth was pressing down on me. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'm your mother," she said softly, her eyes filled with tears. "The woman you thought was your mother, she wasn't your real mother. She was part of an arrangement. We both wanted to protect you, but I made mistakes." My mind reeled. I couldn't process it all at once, but something inside me knew this wasn't a lie. There was no doubt in her voice. I could see the pain in her eyes, the way her hands shook as she held mine. But how could she be my mother? What happened to the woman who raised me? To the life I thought I had? She explained everything then. The man who I had called Dad was an imposter, someone sent to watch over me, to keep me safe from the truth. The real danger had been the people chasing me, those who wanted to use me for reasons I didn't yet understand. My real mother had been forced to disappear to protect me, and in doing so, she had to leave behind everything she knew. But the man who had raised me, he hadn't been the monster I'd imagined. He had been protecting me too, from the world I didn't know existed. As she spoke, it became clear that my life had always been a secret, carefully crafted to keep me safe. But the fire, the letters, the strange events, it all started to make sense. The truth had come out, but the cost was high. In the days that followed, I learned to accept the woman who was now in front of me. She wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But I had to believe in the possibility of healing, of building something real with her again. We both had a lot of broken pieces to fix. And the man who raised me, the one I had once feared, he had been right to protect me, even if it meant hiding the truth. My life was no longer what I thought it was, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The road ahead would be long, full of unanswered questions and unhealed wounds. But for the first time, I wasn't alone. I had answers now, even if they weren't the answers I had wanted. And in the end, that's all any of us can really ask for, the truth, no matter how it comes.